Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to this expert education presentation from the Sashbear Foundation. My name is Doreen Hindman, and I'm the program manager here at Sashbear. The Sashbear Foundation is a Canadian charity recognized nationally and internationally as the leading voice for families impacted by emotion dysregulation, suicidality, and related mental health challenges. You may know us for the Family Connections program, which we provide across Canada, for these expert education series presentations, for our annual Sashbear Awareness Walk held every spring in cities across Canada, or for our many other activities raising awareness and providing skills and hope for families. You can go to our website and follow us on social media to learn more about the work that we do. Now, as I mentioned, Sashbear is a registered Canadian charity, and as a charity, we depend on donations for much of the funding to do our work. And therefore, we ask that if you are able to support us, please make a donation. If every person attending tonight were to make a $5 donation, that would make a huge difference in our small budget. So I ask you to please consider donating even such a small amount at the link that Barb and Trisha will put into the chat now. And remember that you can also choose to become a monthly donor, because just a small regular donation can make a really big difference as we continue to provide support, skills, and education for families to support their loved ones. So with all that said, I would like to introduce the people who are with me this evening and also our guest speakers. So first of all, our guest speakers are Janna Hobbs and Michael Hollander, and they work together as the co-directors of the Boston Child Study Center in Maine, where they each provide expert supervision and training to the DBT program there, as well as clinical consultation to patients and families. They've also both held important roles at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, most notably in the 3 East Continuum, and I'll speak a little bit more to those specifics. Now, Dr. Michael Hollander is a nationally recognized expert on the causation and treatment of self-injury, and he lectures throughout the United States and internationally on the subject. He has been treating adolescents and their families for over 40 years. And in addition to his role at the Boston Child Study Center, Maine, he has held numerous positions of clinical leadership at McLean Hospital. He's the co-founder of McLean's exceptional 3 East dialectical behavior therapy program, where he continues to provide supervision to staff and is a senior consultant working there with families and patients as well. Now, in 2020, a grateful family established the Michael Hollander Ph.D. Endowed Director Fund at McLean, and Dr. Hollander was the first recipient of this endowment as Director of Training and Consultations. In addition, he's the author of a book called Helping Teens Who Cut, Using Dialectical Behavior Therapy to End Self-Injury. And this title won the American Journal of Nursing Book of the Year Award in 2008 and is currently in its 2nd edition. He's also on the faculty of the McLean, Massachusetts General Hospital Child Psychiatry Fellowship Program as an assistant professor part-time, and he was recognized as Teacher of the Year in 1998. I can't believe only once, Michael, and surely they should have recognized you more than that. Dr. Hall. And he was a supervisor in the Behavioral and Research Training Clinic at the University of Washington. In 2004, he became a trainer for behavioral tech, which is the training arm of the Linehan Institute, and therefore travels nationally and internationally to train clinicians worldwide in dialectical behavior therapy. He has a commitment to training clinicians in evidence-based treatments and values his continued involvement in clinical care. Now, turning to Janna. Janna is a licensed independent clinical social worker in Maine and in Massachusetts, and she is trained in and has extensive experience in, guess what? Dialectical behavior therapy, as well as family work. She studied at the University of New Hampshire and Simmons College. Throughout her career, she has provided individual and family treatment in both inpatient and outpatient settings. As part of her illustrious career, she was a co-founder of McLean Hospital's 3 East Continuum, which is the first residential intensive DBT unit for suicidal and self-injuring adolescents, leading the way in treatment of these conditions. She went on to serve as program director and director of clinical services of the 3Es continuum. And in addition to all of these treatment and leadership roles, she also values training and developing new clinicians. So throughout her career, she has supervised interns, postdocs, and mental health workers. Her broad experience working with different diagnoses, treatments, and directing different levels of care inform her assessment and treatment planning. I want to also point out that Janna and Michael were with us last in September of 2023 when they shared what is known from research about incidence and function of self-injury and started to give us a little bit of direction as to how families can be involved. And so if people are interested in hearing what they had to say in September, please go to our website or our YouTube channel and look up that previous presentation, because I know they'll be building on that tonight. So now I'm also joined tonight by two of our volunteers, Trisha and Barb, who will be helping us to monitor the chat and the questions, and also Lynn Curry, who is the co-founder and the president of Sashbear Foundation. And I know Lynn also wants to welcome our guest speakers tonight. Lynn?
Thank you, Doreen. I just wanted to maybe bring the book up, Helping Teens Who Cut, from Michael Hollander, Understanding and Ending Self-Injury. So, and then we'll put the information in the chat as well later on. But I want to take just a moment to say that it's an honor for me to welcome Michael and Janna to this webinar tonight. I had the opportunity to meet with Michael and Janna, like, I would say probably over like 13 years ago for our parent skills group that I learned that was part of 13 years ago. And what I was learning there was so helpful. And my husband and I, Mike and I, like we felt that we needed to bring the skills to Canada, to the families. And it really inspired us to create the Sashbear Foundation here in Canada so we could disseminate important skills, right? Essential skills to families in need so they can effectively support their loved one when they're struggling with BPD and related challenges, right? So I want to say welcome, Michael, welcome, Janna. It's really an honor to have you tonight, and we're looking forward to hear more of what you want to share with us, so then we can embark on those hard conversations with our loved one and be able to effectively support them. So thank you to be here with us tonight.
Very welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
And it is an honor to partner with you to bring this information to more and more people.
Well, all right. I guess we should get started.
You're ready? Okay.
Ready.
Let me share the slides, and you can just tell me when you want to move on to the next one.
Okay. We can move on.
Yeah.
All right. So just so to orient people to what we're going to try to do, we're going to try to go through the kind of content about self-injury pretty quickly. Then John and I are going to do a role play, and we have no idea how that's going to turn out. This will be an unrehearsed endeavor, so hopefully we'll do all right. You know, well, we're not looking for an Academy Award, but we would like it to be relevant to all of you. And then we hope that we'll be able to field some questions from all of you. So I'm going to take the lead on this, which is what is this self-injury, and why do people do it? So non-suicidal self-injury is really what we're going to be focusing in on tonight. And this is the deliberate and immediate damaging of someone's tissue, their own tissue, without suicidal intent. Okay, so the person has no intent of dying. And as a matter of fact, very, very few people die from this kind of behavior. The problem, I just want to say, with this kind of behavior is that it is linked to suicide. So while non-suicidal self-injury is different than suicidal behavior, they're really first cousins, and that getting someone to stop self-injuring becomes terribly important because of its relationship to suicide. So here, the behaviors that we're talking about are cutting, burning, breaking bones, punching walls, scratching, and some forms of skin picking. When you get to skin picking, you really have to make a discernment between, is this an emotion regulation strategy, or is this more of an OCD kind of thing? And they're not so clearly delineated, but it's important to sort of know the function of the behavior. One of the things that we're routinely asked about is, what about eating disorders, smoking, piercings, tattoos? Well, these are not, we don't support these things. These are not great things, but they don't meet the definition of non-suicidal self-injury. They are behaviors that are worrisome and need to be treated, but
maybe not the tattoos.
Maybe not the tattoos or the piercings. Yeah, we can talk some about that. All right, we could change the slide. Okay, so why do people do this? Well, you know, when I first started getting interested in self-injury as this phenomena, most people felt that the leading reason that people self-injured was for attention. And that turns out to be probably the least important reason that people self-injure. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a small group of people who do self-injure to get attention, but the vast majority of people don't self-injure to get attention. They self-injure because if they are in a distressing emotional state, either one in which you're being overwhelmed by your feelings, you really can't sort out actually what's going on for you. You know, you've really lost your mind, and your emotions are running the ship, and half the time you can't figure out which is the most important emotion. You're just getting battered around. It turns out that if you self-injure, you will feel better in a matter of seconds. Now, there are two competing, and they're not so competing theories about this. We don't have the time to go into it, but there is biologic and psychological evidence that is really, really very clear. And it's also supported by what most every self-injurer says about themselves and why they do it, is that it is sometimes they say it's a stress reliever. It helps them feel better. It's really true that you are going to feel better if you self-injure when you're emotionally dysregulated. Now, emotion dysregulation comes in two flavors. There's the over-the-top emotional experience, and you're just sort of hair on fire, you can't think clearly. And then there's the kind of numb and empty feeling that people report. For those people who are reporting numb and empty, it turns out that at the time of self-injury, what happens is they begin to feel more alive again. They can think more clearly. They feel more connected to their bodies. And the other group of folks who are really flying off the handle, they will calm down. Now, there is also this psychological marriage between self-punishment and the need for self-injury. So for some people, they experience such deep self-loathing and such contempt for themselves, and have this sense that they need to be punished, which you can see is already an emotionally charged and aversive situation. They will cut themselves in the service of saying they're being punished, but actually what's happening is they're just getting the positive experience from what happens when you self-injure. Okay, I'm going to say one more thing about this. The problem of self-injury is that it does not help you solve whatever problem got you to self-injure in the first place. all self-injury does is re-regulate you and get you calmer. It does not solve any problems. So the real down side of self-injury is that it actually keeps you stuck in your life, and you don't solve any of your the problems that are getting you to get dysregulated in the first place.
One way to think about it is that someone is having some kind of aversive experience and they can't tolerate it, think they can't tolerate it, haven't learned how to tolerate it, and self-injury is the escape. But the problem is that most likely you will have those feelings again
and again.
And yeah, escape behavior essentially is just avoidance.
Right.
So you don't learn how to manage.
Or learn it that you even can manage. All right. What else we got on the slide here?
Next slide.
Next slide. Okay, so we'll just go on with it. There is okay. There is a small group of people who see non-suicidal self-injury as a way of preventing suicide, and so that they'll start to feel really suicidal and really awful, and to get out of that, they will self-injure, and then of course they feel better, and so suicide falls out of their mind for a period of time. Suicide
being the ultimate escape behavior.
Yeah.
So this is the step before it.
Right. There are some people who are self-injure use the self-injury as a communication, either to themselves and to others sometimes, about how awful they feel. These are people who don't seem to feel that they can adequately communicate their distress short of some sort of behavior. That they really don't think anybody will really take them seriously unless they can absolutely demonstrate about how much pain they're in. And as an avoidance strategy, that is, I'm so anxious about, say, going to school, I cut myself, and then no one's paying any attention about me going to school anymore, and I'm doing something else, going to the emergency room or something like that. That's a very, it happens. It's not a very, very common reason that people do it, but it is in there. And the good news and the bad news is that you can have more than one of these functions that is contributing to the maintenance of this behavior.
Do you want to say anything about thrill seeking?
What? Thrill
seeking and distraction.
Yes. Sometimes this is I think I've seen this much more in adolescents than in adults. It becomes sort of a thrill-seeking kind of thing, a distraction from emotional pain. It can also be sort of who's more courageous. It's like people see how long you can stand a cigarette over your skin kind of thing. But that's also a small group of people. But really, we're telling you this because there isn't one reason why people self-injure. And it's, if you're going to have a conversation with someone who's self-injuring, you should sort of have some of these ideas in the back of your head as what this could be. And I think in some ways, the most important thing to keep in mind is that the behavior actually works at making people feel better, and that people who self-injure feel terrible. They just really feel awful. And that this is a tried and true way of helping yourself feel better in the moment.
Okay, next
all right.
Slide.
Oh, this is you.
Yeah. So to kick off how we start to talk to people, so Fred Rogers quote, I'm sure a lot of you know this: anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. And I just like this when we're talking about self-injury and thinking about how to actually connect with a loved one about it, is that everyone's different, but most everyone has some embarrassment or shame about this behavior. And really being able to talk with someone else about it, someone who is curious and non-judgmental and who is seeking to understand it, can be so validating and helpful to the person who's struggling. So
Yeah.
start with being non-judgmental.
Right.
Okay. Next slide.
All right.
Someone just asked if the training is being recorded, and I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, we'll just keep going.
Okay.
Yes, it is being recorded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so some suggestions, and again, we'll talk about different things, but these are some things to start to have in the back of your mind. The first thing would be to center yourself, for you to make sure that you're regulated, and that which can be difficult when you think about approaching a difficult conversation like this. But if you are tense, or whatever you're feeling, your loved one, who is likely to be someone who is ultra sensitive to other people's emotions, they're going to pick up on the emotion and have a much more difficult time paying attention to your words. So you want to find your center, feel grounded and relaxed and non-judgmental about your loved one as well as yourself. You want to give yourself some grace as you approach this.
Yeah, I just want to add, we're Janna and I is not suggesting that you stop being tense, angry, or scared, but that you acknowledge to yourself that you are kind of tense, and that you're angry, and that you're scared, and that you're going to, now that you've got this in your mind, you're going to try to stay as balanced as you can in these situations. So it's not about not feeling these things. It's about acknowledging that you're feeling them and figuring out what you're going to do to manage them.
And jumping down the list a little bit, this is why timing is critical, because you want to make sure that it's at a time when you don't have big vulnerabilities, like you had a really tough day at work and a problem with one of your friends, or you're missing sleep, whatever it is. You should be in a good place, and you should also choose the timing with the person you want to talk to, that it ideally is at a time when they can fully attend and that their vulnerabilities aren't especially high. We also think it's important for you to just take a few minutes and think about what is my objective in this conversation? Is it to express concern? Is it to evaluate whether or not the person may need to be assessed for whether or not they need stitches? Are you wanting to find out a little bit more about what it means to the person who you're talking to, how they think about self-injury? But think about what's your objective in the conversation, and you can't probably get it all done at once. So we're also saying you start with a conversation, but there are probably many conversations to have, because it is a potentially tender subject, and people can be very defensive about it. You want to consider the age and the developmental level of your loved one. You're going to have a different kind of conversation with an old 12-year-old, 11-year-old. They are starting to self-injure that young as well as younger now. So that is a different stance than, say, a friend of yours. So you just want to keep in mind where they are developmentally, and having a way to to assess medical risk. Sometimes it might be useful, depending on the situation, for if it's your child, to take the child to their PCP to sort of be checked out, because sometimes, say you've discovered self-injury on their arms, they may be cutting in other areas of their body, and you're not going to get involved in that, but having a doctor check them out is a good idea. Sometimes it's a deep cut and stitches are in order, so you do want to think about that piece.
I think the idea of that you're going to check your kid's body periodically to see whether they're self-injuring or not. You need to figure out what your objective is on this one, because just think about yourself as a teenager, and would you be interested in your mom or dad having that kind of invasion to your own space and privacy? It makes sense to me why parents want to know in some ways, and in other ways, what are you going to do with that information after you have it? We can talk some about after you have the conversation, what's the role of the parent at that point. So let's move on. Next slide.
So following on the heels of if someone's doing body checks, your parent is doing body checks on you, it's not going to diminish embarrassment and shame. As I said before, people generally, even if they say, look, everyone's doing it, it's not a problem, there's an inherently, I think deep in their heart of hearts, everyone knows that this isn't actually solving the problem, and they don't generally feel good about it. So when you are talking about it, avoid the tendency to get polarized, because, well, jumping down to the last point, that if you are just working really hard to get them to see that they should stop, or that this is a problem, it leaves out the other perspective, in that it actually is helpful. It is solving a bit of a problem for them. And the more you pull on this rope over here to say it's a problem and it has to stop, they're going to pull on the other side, because that also is a truth. So you want to, in that non-judgmental stance, you want to be curious too about their experience. How do they think about it? How do they feel about it? And really be open to whatever they're willing to tell you, so that you can actually learn more about why they're doing this, because as Michael said, everyone is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that the only thing that I would add here is that if you can find your way, and it's not easy, to being curious, then the idea is really being open to what you hear, and not trying to say, well, that doesn't make sense, or isn't there a better way or a different way of doing that. My advice is, if you get to the point of you're having a discussion about what the person's thoughts are, feelings are, how they understand how this is both beneficial and probably a problem, you have accomplished a great deal. And when it comes to change and solution, while you may feel that there's like, we got to get this done tonight, this will take a little bit of time. And if you get into problem solving right away, especially with an adolescent, especially when they haven't asked for it, you're going to get nothing but pushback. I'm saying that with more certainty than it probably deserves, but I would say more likely than not, you've now gone too far in the conversation.
Next slide.
Oh, here are the dialectics.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, it is their attempt to solve a problem, and there are better, more healthy ways to do that. But keeping this in your mind that it does solve a problem, that is their experience, could be helpful to you. And you also know that it's not healthy, and it's very problematic in some ways, and so they need to work to change it. The next one is their problem to solve, and you can't condone it or become resigned. We've talked with lots of parents who, the kid is determined, you can't make me stop. This is my body, and my decision, and they get into a bit of a taffy pull with their child, and then they get resigned, and they say, they sort of give in to feel helpless, and then just stop, and saying, okay, you manage it. So it really, this is, I think, particularly difficult for parents, because you need to keep walking beside your child, or if it's not your child, someone you care about. And you're going to validate that yes, it solves a problem for them. And you're also not going to stop trying to help them with it, help them find a better way to manage whatever it is that they're trying to manage. And the last one being, kids in particular will often say, well, this is my body, my choice. And that's true. You can't actually stop someone from self-injuring. Parents sometimes try, remove all the sharps from the house. And then the kid will go out and pick up a ragged stone and self-injure. So you really don't want to be in that the police state. It is their body. They do need to do the work to change it. But if they are sort of holding on to that side solely, my body, the other side of that is that it dramatically affects people who care about them. So both things are true. And again, you want to try to hold these all together in your mind.
Yeah, the idea here is to hold them together, honoring each side. So it can't be, okay, yeah, it's their attempt to solve a problem, and there are so many better ways of doing it. It really, you have to really sort of get in there with, this is your loved one's way of solving a problem. And the problem they're trying to solve is how they feel, or in the case of people who are kind of feeling numb and empty, what they don't feel in the moment. So the moment that people self-injure is usually a moment where they are in a great deal of distress. We really can't highlight that enough. Even if you don't see it, it's there. No one self-harms just because they can. All right, what else we got?
Remember.
All right.
So
yeah.
There are so many skills needed to be able to stop this behavior that's so reinforcing. If you self-injure, you're immediately reinforced, and it's a very difficult behavior to stop, and it means you have to make a lot of changes and understand a lot more about yourself and your emotional self. So this is not quick and easy. It does take time. I can encourage you not to get discouraged about it, and just know, if you're not someone who self-injures, you can look pretty easy, like just don't hurt yourself. But it is actually, it involves learning a lot of skills and making a lot of changes. So it does take some time to resolve.
I think that the thing for parents especially, and you know, if your partner is someone who self-injures, it's also going to take some time for you to learn some skills when you become aware of this problem, which is, you know, skills of distress tolerance, of radical acceptance, and how you're going to manage all of this. So John is right. It's going to take the self-injurer some time to figure out some skills, and it's going to take you some time to be able to sit with this problem and not make it worse, because that's often what happens once the problem surfaces. Then more conflict around it gets generated, and people lose their way pretty quickly.
And remember to pay attention to their strengths and what is going well, because when there's this thing happening, it can just take over, and you can sort of get some tunnel vision and forget to pay attention to their strengths and actually what's going well for them. And lastly, always telling parents, take care of yourself, maintain a routine that nourishes you, and in part because this is a little bit of a marathon and not a sprint, you do want to be making sure that you are doing things that lift your spirits, that keep you open to, you know, the world and what else is going on, and not get too over-focused or bogged down in this issue, because people do stop self-injuring, and not as quickly as we would like, but it is something that does change. Yeah,
it is something that actually can be treated and treated successfully. It also, not that this is great news, people usually stop self-injuring as they get more into adulthood. It's not always the case, but if you're still self-injuring into adulthood, to my mind, in all likelihood, you haven't solved some of the problems that you need to solve. All right, now.
Okay. So we were going to do a role play.
We were.
And we thought we'd do, you're going to have to use your imaginations and see me as a 16-year-old.
I have no problem.
And let's see, Michael's the parent, and he's just found out that I am self-injuring, and we're going to make this up as we go along.
So it could bomb, but I promise you we won't do it for more than 7 minutes, and then we'll end and
answer some questions.
What I'd like you to notice, and I may or may not do it well, so that I'm going to try to be curious and validating, while at the same time having a certain level of firmness about what I need for myself to understand. So let's see how this goes. So you're 15?
Oh, I'd say yes. Let's make me 15.
Even better.
Younger.
Even better. All right, here we go. 7 minutes. Hey, Janna, how are you?
Fine.
Day at school?
Fine.
Fine. Everything's fine?
Fine.
Okay, I have a hard conversation that I have to have with you. Okay.
I have some homework.
I appreciate that. This will not take too long. Can you give me 3 minutes?
Yeah, okay.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. No matter what, you're going to stay in that chair for 3 minutes?
Okay.
All right, good. I'm delighted. All right, so here's the thing. The other day you were wearing one of those sheer blouses with sheer sleeves. And
yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Oh, what am I going to say?
Go on.
And I noticed that you had lots of cuts up and down your arm.
Yeah.
Well, it made me worried. And so I wanted to understand with you what was going on.
It's not a problem.
Okay.
It's not a problem. Everybody does it,
Yeah.
and it's not a problem.
Okay. So you don't see it as a problem right now.
No.
But can you understand why I might be a bit worried about it?
Yeah,
okay.
I guess maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to. You don't have to be worried, and I might be worried. So everybody's doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is everybody doing it?
Well, I don't know.
Well, how about do you have some idea about why you're doing
it? I just feel better when I do it.
You feel better when you self-injure?
Yeah.
Okay. And how are you feeling? I'm trying to understand is like, are you feeling okay anyway, and then you self-injure, or do you find that when you're really having a problem and you can't figure something out, that's when
I don't know. It just happens.
it just happens? Yeah. Well, you know how I feel about
It's
things.
almost 3 minutes.
It's almost 3 minutes, but can we continue to talk about this, because I really feel like from what I can tell, a lot of people are doing this, but not everybody's doing it. And it's so hard for me to know that you're hurting yourself.
Well, that's your problem.
Yes, it is my problem. There's no two ways about that. But if I said to you, it doesn't make a difference to me whether you're hurting yourself or not, I wouldn't. Would that be the dad you wanted?
No.
Okay, so I'm worried. So what I want to do is keep an open mind, and let's see if we can talk a little bit more about this. I'm really interested in sort of what happens for you, that this is something you do to help yourself feel better.
Okay, is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes are up. You were great. Okay, so I don't know. It's probably not believable in some ways, but be interested in a couple of comments.
Or if there are, Dorian, you're seeing something common that we could do a different role play
on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I invite people to put comments into the chat where we can all see them. Well, Janna and Michael and myself can all see them. A couple of questions have come up that maybe are the types of conversations that people might want to have with their kids or with their loved ones, not necessarily children. I think first of all, this idea that you might want to remove the tools that somebody's using to injure themselves. Somebody's mentioned here that maybe their therapist has suggested this would be helpful. But if a family member decides that this is something they want to do and have the conversation, hey, do you think maybe we should take all those razor blades out of your room? Is that an appropriate conversation, first of all? And secondly, if so, how would you approach that?
So actually, there are therapists who recommend that. And I think the way we think about it is that this can be, it can be helpful for a period of time, but you need to have a plan because you can't remove all sharps. It's trying to make the intervention in the environment rather than in the individual, and you can only do that for so long. And what's your exit strategy? How do you help them? How do you get out of that? So that doesn't help them develop the skills they need to be in a world that has knives and scissors and razor blades and sharp rocks. So I think there are sometimes that when someone's just coming out of the hospital, for example, or there might be times that you do that, but there should be conversations about with the individual. Okay, what do you need in order to manage this on your own? You want to invite them into the discussion about how okay, we will partner with you to help you stop this behavior, but at what point do we reintroduce, leave the knives unlocked, for example?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. It's having an exit strategy, and I also think that it's very different if the self-injurer says, "I'd like, would you please get this stuff out," versus we're going to solve this problem by getting all the sharps out, because the second one isn't going to solve the problem. But even if the person were to say, this will be helpful to me, then I think Janna's point is, well, okay, but how are we going to know when we can do this? Now, the part of the problem here also is that you're doing something called cue removal. And so if the behavior of self-injury is controlled by, say, the cues, seeing a razor blade, and you take the razors away, then the urges for self-injury will go down. But as soon as the person sees another razor blade, the impulse for self-injury comes back up. So you have to know whether you're actually helping someone actually solve the problem, or you're just sterilizing the environment and you don't actually have much psychological change.
There's one comment here from someone who has said that her daughter has chosen intentionally to say, I'm feeling really fragile and susceptible right now. So can you hold on to my sharps for me so that I don't? So that sounds like the type of thing where the conversation was happening beforehand. Yeah. And this is a solution that's been worked out together, not imposed on the person who's self-injuring. Is that right?
That's correct. But again, and maybe this isn't the right time, because it sounds like this person still suffers, feeling fragile. But there needs to be a discussion. How are we going to know that you're sturdy enough to have the urges and still not have somebody hold onto them for you? But I wouldn't. It sounds like this person is early on in things.
I'm trying to sort of sort through some of these things and find the types of questions that are going to be really helpful to people. Someone has asked, how do I approach this with curiosity? Like, what are some examples of curious questions that I would reasonably ask that are going to not be polarizing, but kind of keep the conversation open?
You think about trying to get them to articulate their perspective. So what you're curious about is, what's their theory about why they're doing this? What's their experience when they cut themselves? What do they notice about when they get the urge? It's all about, you're on a, fact-finding mission in a way. You are not going in with any preconceived ideas about why he or she is doing it or anything like that. It's really, how do they think about this? Right. What is it like for them? That's what you're curious about.
Right. And without ever having to say, and we would really ever say, like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. It's the right behavior. It's a good thing to do. It's just really trying to open the door to a collaborative process if you can.
I think another theme that's coming up in some of the questions I'm seeing is about timing. Like people asking, well, what do I do like in the event where the kid is, the person is really, really dysregulated and you can tell that they're immediately starting or moving towards self-harming, or they've just self-harmed and you're seeing the outcome, the result. And are these is this still the time to sort of think about not polarizing, bringing curiosity, or is it a different type of conversation when you're in the moment?
I think it's even more important, but it really, it's so much easier to say than to actually do. And we're not talking about people being so calm, but it's a level of distress that you want to convey that's sort of well within bounds. Like, wait, hold on, this is really worrisome. I've got some, this really scares me. I mean, parents can say that, and I'm really trying to understand what's going on for you, that you do this. It's just so hard for me to understand. And again, what we're talking about is the initial conversation, because somewhere along the line you have to introduce the notion of, like, I think this really is a problem, and I think we need to get some help for this problem. But if you go in right away, because one of the things that it was on the slide, I don't know, is that what we see as the problem, self-injury, most of the people who self-injure see it as the solution to the problem, the solution to how they're feeling in the moment. So if right away, if we can't get, we're not on the same page, so we have to find a way to get on the same page with each other.
Yeah. When in doubt, validate.
Yeah.
Find something to validate and focus on the emotion. Is there an emotion that you can validate?
Right.
In the conversation, whether it's if they're on their way, and you think they might self-injure, or even afterwards, you want to see if you can find something to validate, because that always helps people regulate, and it also improves the connection and a feeling of emotional safety. So I think no matter what else you're doing, that can be really helpful.
Yeah. And the validation can simply be, my goodness, you must have been really distressed, or that must have been really hard for you in that interpersonal situation. You are never condoning the behavior. You can, lots of times parents get mixed up about this. Is we're not suggesting that what you're doing is sort of giving the behavior a wink and it's really okay. What we're trying to validate is the distress that leads to the behavior. The behavior, of course, has to stop if someone's going to be, have a more successful and a life that's more on an even keel.
Okay, so when people are maybe when the person who's self-injuring is so determined not to talk about it, like they just completely shut down the conversation, maybe it's none of my business, or it's my body, leave me alone. That is it. Within that moment, do you persist and try to be curious, or do you wait for another moment when they might be a little more open to talking about it, or is that really contextual?
Well, it's contextual, but I'd also want to try to get the last word in. I'm interested in what you because if someone said it's my body, I would say you're absolutely right. It is your body, and it's your body that lives in this family that I'm connected to. So both things are true. Yes, it's your body, but I'm in some ways connected to you. So, right, it affects me.
Yeah, that requires a very nimble thought process in the moment to be able to think that dialectic and articulate it.
Yes,
you have practice.
I'm forever saying like this is Monday morning quarterbacking.
It's a lot easier to talk about it. And if you have someone in your life who's self-injuring, sort of prepping yourself.
Little behavioral rehearsal.
Yeah, because I have worked with parents who, with those kinds of kids who are just absolute wall goes up. You have nothing to say here. This is completely mine to manage, and this is the hard part, because of course it is, and you don't want to just let yourself be turned away. You just want to keep opening the door, just saying, I get that's how you feel about it. Mm-hmm. I feel differently. I'd love to talk about it. Right. Or just keep, you're saying, get the last word in. I think
that's more me than probably you.
But you want to just keep, we sometimes call them drive-bys, right? You just sort of drop a little something in, because clearly if someone's saying that, they're very defensive, they're not feeling open, they're we call it being willful, right? We get willful when there's a threat of some kind. So if someone's responding to you in that way, remind yourself, okay, this feels like a threat in some way to them. And I need to figure out, how can I approach, validate, yes, your body, and this is really hard for me, and I'd love to talk with you more about it. So, and just keep, you might take you a day to come up with another little something to pop in, but that would be my recommendation on that.
As hard as it is, there is a certain degree of patience that parents and loved ones need to have about this, and it's patience in the face of being worried and scared and all of that. But if you bust in and try to control the situation, you're only going to make it worse. So sometimes you just have to play the long game. And this is, I think, with self-injury, we're not talking years and years and years. It's more months usually than years.
Okay. I think this is a defensive posture as well, where the person who's self-injuring maybe tries to turn it around and blame the family member. Well, I'm self-harming because you are always on my case about it. Or, if you were a better parent, partner, friend, I wouldn't need to do this. Again, certainly I can see the long game coming into play there, but how would you respond and keep that conversation open? Because you're also dealing with your own hurt when you're judged that way.
I would say, I think to the degree it's true, because I would say, yes, I think I am on your case more than I need be, because I'm worried about you. But if I'm on your case in other ways, maybe we can have a discussion about that, because I don't see how your self-injuring is going to help me not be on your case more. If you want me on your case less, let's figure out how to do that. But it can't be, well, I wouldn't be on your case if you just did all the things I asked you to do, because that's going to be a non-starter. So but I think there is the opening of how are we going to figure this out together, right?
Yeah, I think, and if you're sort of flummoxed in that kind of conversation, which understandable, I think, as best you can, just remind yourself, this is an offense as a defense. And you could just ask a question. You could just say, whoa, I didn't know that. Tell me what it is that is making you want to self-injure. You may not have that opening, but you can just ask more questions about it.
And another thing a few people have asked, where they don't have personal direct evidence that the person is self-injuring, but it's come to them through another person, right? A friend told a friend who told the parent.
Yeah.
How would you approach trying to open the conversation when you're not supposed to know about it?
This is why we ask people not to keep secrets,
right. Because now you have information that you actually can't use, unless you want to go back to the person. What I would say is, you need to go back to so-and-so and say, if my kid says, how do you know, or who told you, or what, I want to try to be as transparent and as possible, and maybe protect the relationship. But when parents sometimes call me up and say, I want to tell you this thing that's going on, and frequently it's around self-injury, but I don't want you to tell my kid that I told you. I'm not sure what they would like me to do. To say, you know, I had this thought over coffee this morning that you might be self-injuring. And it's people need to be to find a way to be direct with one another, kind, but direct. And the worry that you're going to blow the relationship up with your kid, well,
you might, in this situation, you might worry about blowing up a friendship that the kid has.
Right.
That, I think that's a tough one, because if you were to say, you know, I think you might be self-injuring, you don't want to be in a position of not being honest. And I think adolescents are really good at sniffing that kind of thing out. And since you are trying to have a good, strong, authentic, honest relationship, it's a tough spot to be in. One way you could say, I've heard you're self-injuring. I don't feel comfortable telling you where I heard it. It does kind of make some not good waves in their friendships potentially, but I don't think you can pretend that you didn't hear it from somewhere.
And while I understand where John is going with it, if someone said to me, someone told me you were self-injuring, my entire focus at this point is not on my self-injury, but who told you? Who told you?
Yes.
Right. So I think that if a parent gets a call, when you get that call, you're going to have to ask the person how. Thank you very much for telling me this is really, really important, but I don't know what to do with this information, and I really feel like I need to do something. So are you willing to say that you told me that you had concerns, you know, to let my kid know that. It will have short-term effects, but you know, I think people get, I think from my experience, a friend who's worried about another friend, that sort of transgression of saying too much gets forgiven pretty quickly when someone realizes it really was on my behalf.
Okay, great, thank you. There are so many comments and so many questions, but I know the time, and I think that we are going to need to close. I think maybe I'll just throw it back to you, Michael and Janna, and say, is there anything that you would like to add at this point before we close?
I would encourage people to. Someone just asked, is the ultimate goal therapy? And generally speaking, yes, we think if someone is using this behavior, they do need some more help and support, and we also know some kids are allergic to therapy. But I think that you do want to offer it if you can, and we're big supporters of parents getting support.
Right.
You know, there's some great support groups and
family connections,
and or find a therapist for yourself to help you think things through, and just get some guidance, because it's a little bit like a bomb going off in your life, and it's a lot to manage. So take care of yourselves and get the help you need.
Yeah, I don't think I could add anything to that. That sounds just about right. You will all be in a better position of solving this problem if you start by taking care of yourselves. You'll have the resilience, and more likely you'll have the resilience and the energy to do it. So that's what I would just highlight that.
Can I just pick up on one thing that you've said then about therapy being, you know, really helpful, both for the person who's self-injuring and for the family member? A couple of people have mentioned that their person who is self-injuring has been in therapy for a number of years, and the self-injury is continuing. So is that a case where you might want to look at maybe a different type of therapy or switching therapists?
Yes, I would want to know. If it's possible, but say it's an adolescent, and I'd want to know what the therapist's sense of this was, how they understood this. If they didn't know that this was going on, I think that says a problem in the relationship. And I think that there are all of the more evidence-based treatments target self-injury. Now, DBT does it the most directly, but I know you're going to have folks on who do MBT. And while MBT doesn't target self-injury in the same way, it is always part of the discussion about what happened to your mind, that this was what you did, that this followed. It's therapies where the therapist, and I was one of these before I became a DBT therapist, was, okay, we'll get the self-injury to stop because we'll solve every other problem. And then there won't be any need for self-injury. But it turns out, really, if you stop the self-injury, you're more likely to be able to address those other problems more effectively and quickly.
And if the individual is really attached to their therapist and doesn't want to see anybody else, doesn't want to end the therapy, you can ask for a consultation.
Right.
Because, and especially for therapies that go on a long time, sometimes it's good to have another set of eyes on it and just sort of look at, okay, what are you working on? What progress has happened, and and what's going on with the self-injury. So
right.
But find a experienced therapist who can do a consultation.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say about that is that I have seen any number of kids who tell me in consultation, who tell me they have a great relationship with their therapist, but actually nothing in their lives are changing. And so while I think it's necessary to have a good relationship, people aren't going to therapy to have good relationships. They're going to therapy to solve their problems and maybe figure out how to have relationships outside of therapy. But
it's the dialectic between acceptance and change, which we all have to do in all relationships. But in therapy, it's really important that when people like to the acceptance part of therapy, and change needs to be in there, balancing it. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds like a really good place to end, with that acceptance and change dialectic. I want to remind people out there, if you didn't catch the acronyms, DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. MBT is mentalization-based therapy. In Canada, DBT is a little bit more widely available, and you can learn more about these, of course, with a Google search. But also, I want to remind people that Janna and Michael were with us in September, and their previous presentation is on our YouTube channel. So a lot of the questions that have come in today, I think, will be answered if people go back and watch that previous presentation, which covered more of the basics of the functions and what self-injury might be serving as a function for the person doing it. I want to thank you again so much for having been with us. You can see there's such an incredible appetite for this, and people are just really, really seeking really credible information about this. And this has been so important to help them understand what's going on and have them approach us to begin to deal with this in their families' lives. So thank you again so very much.
Thanks for having us.
And be well.